Good evening. Can everyone hear me? Good evening. Thank you for joining us for a wonderful career panel. We are so fortunate to have a really esteemed group of people. I was just talking with them, a few upstairs and in the green room, and I think together they have an incredible body of knowledge and wisdom which they're going to share to you. Before I begin, I just want to say my name is Trudy Steinfeld, and I am the Assistant Vice President of the Wasserman Career Center at New York University, and based in New York, but obviously NYU has not only a small campus here in DC, but we have 11 other campuses, and we have career offices in Abu Dhabi and Shanghai, and as well as all the different things we're doing in New York. And all of us associated with NYU are very excited to talk about career and possibilities, and certainly being in DC and talking about the possibilities. Rather than hearing me talk a lot of the time, I know this is a relatively small group. I think it's great. We're going to have an intimate conversation, but I should also tell you we are streaming this, so other students in other parts of NYU at different campuses can see and take advantage of getting this information. So I'm going to ask the panelists to briefly introduce themselves, ask some questions, and then we'll leave time for all of you who are in the audience here in DC to ask some questions. All right, so thank you again. So, Carrie, if you'd like to begin, if you can each just introduce yourself, the organization you work for, and just tell a little bit about how you got into your organization. And okay, thanks.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Oh, no. Good evening, everyone. All right, great. My name is Carrie Clinton. I work as the Strategic Outreach Specialist for the Peace Corps, and I actually had the pleasure of serving as a Peace Corps volunteer in Bulgaria from 2005 to 2007, and worked as an NGO advising volunteer there. And currently I work essentially recruiting through our Diversity and National Outreach office in volunteer recruitment and selection. The Peace Corps, if you are not familiar with it, is a federal government agency that gives people the opportunity to serve in developing countries throughout the world. We're currently in about 60 countries, and you serve for 27 months developing grassroots projects there. And then some of the advantages of the Peace Corps include being a federal program. There are no fees associated with it. In addition to that, when you return, you do have opportunities for graduate school, as well as what we call non-competitive eligibility for federal employment, which I can get into that later on with that.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shana Bergman, and I work at Deloitte as a strategic talent business advisor. So to break down what that means, I work in HR. I work very closely with the partners who lead the tax function at Deloitte, helping them with a variety of different things that are all sort of strategic and people related. I also teach at GW. I teach public speaking. And prior to working at Deloitte, I ran and built the HR function at a hippie law firm in New York called ACTION. And basically from there, I also taught at NYU for a little bit, went there for grad school, and here I am. So nice to speak with all of you.
Please.
Hi, everyone. Does my microphone work? I'm not sure. As long as you can hear me,
Yeah.
I can project.
I think it's on now.
Okay. I'm Krista Miner, and I'm currently the academic program manager at a foundation based at NIH. The foundation's name is Foundation for Advanced Education in the Sciences, and in my role, I primarily manage all the functions of the graduate school. So that includes faculty recruitment, curriculum development, outreach and advertising of the programs, enrollment management, budget development. I have longstanding interest in higher education administration and academics. Prior to this position, I worked on the Fulbright program. I have a bit of an international background as well and interest. I worked in the Europe-Eurasia unit. And I walked into that position through my previous job, which was managing education grants at the University of Chicago. And that was essentially my first job when I moved to the US. I hail from Europe. I got my degrees at European universities. So perhaps if there are internationals among some of you, I would be very happy to give some tips.
So you went to Chicago, realized how cold it was, and you said, I think I'll go south. Okay, thank you. Rajani.
Good evening, everyone. Rajani Frederick. I am a public health practitioner. So for those of you interested in public health, I'm the person you'll want to talk with amongst my other panelists. I came to Washington, D.C. in 2007 upon graduating from undergrad, and I worked on the Hill, where I conducted health policy for about 3 years, after which I joined kind of the federal advocacy, the other side, for the National Urban League, which is a big civil rights organization. And through the notorious networking that occurs on DC, I found my way at the community level with a national public health nonprofit that focuses on built environment and social determinants of health. So I've kind of come full circle from the federal to the advocacy lobbying realm to now community-based local programming. So I'm happy to talk with anyone that's interested in kind of a convoluted way of getting to where you want to be.
Sarah, please.
Hi, I'm Sarah Ruggiero, and I work for the Media and External Affairs team at the World Wildlife Fund. My job is varied and different every single day. So we obviously work on a variety of landscapes and species and environmental issues. So what we do is develop strategic communications for the brand, as well as tell our stories, manage our reputation, and of course there's also some rapid response public relations stuff in there. I have a very interesting background. I spent a lot of time working as an environmental journalist in Australia and throughout Southeast Asia.
So you know what a flat white is?
I do, and a long black.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think having that mix of cultures and visiting different places has given me a great perspective to work on or at an organization that's so international. Yeah.
Right. Chip.
Hi, my name is Chip Bishop. I'm the Director of Student Programs at the Cato Institute, which is a think tank here in DC. We cover basically anything that the government is involved in. We have somebody studying it and writing about it and telling the public about it. My path here is, a little unorthodox. I went to a little liberal arts school in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And after that, I moved to South Korea, where I taught at a university and started my own little business for 2 years, then came back to do graduate school and landed a job at the Cato Institute, and this was about 6 years ago. So if you're interested in how do you patch a life together from lots of different angles and end up where you eventually want to be, that's kind of what I'm navigating myself, so I'd be glad to talk to you.
Please, Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jen Ridinger. Right now I'm doing congressional affairs for an Inspector General's office, and that Inspector General's office is at the General Services Administration, GSA. GSA handles public buildings and civilian procurement for the federal government. And in the Inspector General's role, we audit and investigate the agency in order to improve operations and efficiency and the management of the agency. And in that role, I handle all congressional inquiries, our reporting to Congress. Background, I came from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce before I took a pay cut and became a staff assistant for my boss, and it has paid off immensely in that I love my job, moved up very quickly, have a very good boss and great people to work with, and a mission that I'm excited to be a part of.
So, of course, I'm throwing all my questions out based on what all of you said, because I think people that are here in D.C. are always something that almost each of you mentioned. I have this interesting story. If people want to know how I kind of cobbled it together and I lived here or I came from here, how did it happen? So how did it happen? Because, you can't help but read, well, I can only read so much of the news these days without wanting to put the covers over my head. But when I do read the news, you hear, about immigration, there's only so many visas, they go in so many hours. We hear about, and the same challenges are happening, in the EU, Australia, other parts of the world. So how, whether you're a U.S. citizen or not, how do you kind of make the transition to some of the interesting things that you're all doing? I feel like I want to do all of these things. How do you make that transition? How do you get into that network? So who wants to begin? Sarah?
I can talk to that. So what I've found in DC, and I obviously look at everything from a communications standpoint, and so often people, we get ingrained in these habits where we're communicating on behalf of someone else or another organization or our boss, and I think people in DC are really great at communicating about themselves. So saying, I am passionate about this and I want to do this, how do I get there? And a lot of times it is unorthodox. So when I left Australia, I spent some time in Vancouver before coming here, and I knew I wanted to work for the World Wildlife Fund. I am extremely passionate about species and animals and the environmental issues that impact their survival. And so I also took a huge pay cut and took an internship with the World Wildlife Fund. And while I was there, of course you're working for that organization and you're doing your best and you're working long hours, but you're also communicating about how much you want to be there. And what you can bring to the organization. So I think that people in DC tend to be driven about themselves in addition to what they're passionate about. I don't know if that...
Krista?
I would add to that essentially coming to these career services talks, that's how I got started. Because I moved over through marriage to the US, so I really had no networks. I did have good and strong degrees and good education from Europe, but had no connections. And at the time, my husband was enrolled as a student at the University of Chicago. So I went to the Career Services office and I tapped into the networks, started attending events such as these. I was very pleasantly surprised how open people were to talk to me during the reception, and then they started connecting me. Prior to that, for a few months, I just applied by myself through the internet, and I never got any feedback. And once I knew that I wanted to stay in higher education, and once I started focusing on just some universities rather than just throwing out my application at any organization that had a job that vaguely interested me, I started to get phone calls. And coming from Europe and knowing how there is no career services, really, they are only just about getting started with that. Maybe in the UK, not so much on the continent. I think here in the US, as alums of US universities, you have these great people working and connecting, and the alumni network. I remember I was able to, I don't know if it's the same at the NYU, but they had very detailed database of people where the cities they lived in, the organizations they worked in, and I found tapping into those networks very helpful, and everybody was really open to talk to me and very welcoming.
Did you want to add?
I was just going to, I agree. Your network is probably going to be one of your strongest assets, particularly being part of New York University. I wish I could relate. I graduated from a small liberal arts college, probably smaller than yours, in central Pennsylvania, named Juniata College. And in terms of network, it's not nearly as broad as NYU's. So what I often found was that applying to internships was the way that I came to DC. I applied to an internship that I was going to be placed with NIH because my background is biomedical. But instead, I was placed on Capitol Hill and had no reference really for the legislative process. I was actually quite upset that I was placed on Capitol Hill because I'm originally from Ohio, so I was placed in the Ohio Senator's office, Sherrod Brown. Sherrod Brown is the senator. And it took just a week for me to meet the senator and to meet with the staff, and I absolutely fell in love with the office and was exposed to so many great things. I learned intimately about the legislative process. I transitioned into a legislative position right when we were considering healthcare, and being that my background was biomedical, that's how public health sprung forth. So I really have to emphasize the fact that doing an internship, getting exposure, even if it's the exposure that you're not expecting. I had no reference of Capitol Hill, again, no interest on being there, but once I was there, I saw so many opportunities, and from that opportunity branched even more. That's how I was connected to the National Urban League. And then from the National Urban League, I attended a reception of my current organization, CommonHealth ACTION, and pretty much refused to leave. So I was there till like 10 p.m. at night because I was so enthralled with the work that they were doing. It was a completely different lens on approaching public health and looking at it from a systems level. So really networking, internships, that's the way to go. It's through people. It's rarely through cold applying.
So what I'm going to do, just because I want all the panelists to speak, I'm going to move on to another question, even though I know everybody has great stories, and you can integrate that into the next question. But what I'm going to move to Shana, and one of the things, and a couple of you mentioned it actually in your responses, and then I'm going to pick on people who haven't spoken yet, of course, because I know you're anxious to get in there. But I'm going to start with you. There's a lot being written, discussed in the media about passion. Like Sarah mentioned, I wanted to work for this organization. And in your role, especially in HR and talent identification, and by the way, Deloitte has a whole lot of NYU alums there, all over. How much does that matter? That demonstrating, I may not have every skill set that you're looking for, but I'm smart. You can teach me this, but I want to work for this organization. So could you talk about that role in securing jobs?
Absolutely. Passion is huge. I remember when I started working back when I was a teenager, somebody said to me, the reason that they hesitated offering a job to me was because when I came in, I was so professional and I was trying to fill every little niche that they needed me to do that I wasn't coming across as somebody who was excited. Which is funny, because I'm probably the most excited person you'll ever meet. I'm a very enthusiastic person, so I was like, what? How does she think that I'm not excited? But it was very good feedback, because as somebody who sits in HR and works with people every single day, one of the things that we look for, both in somebody that we're looking to bring into our organization, but also people who we're looking to grow and to retain for a long time, is that passion. Passion for being there, passion for being open to a lot of things. And so what that means is, and I think we addressed it, is it's important to really know what it is that you want and to try to do whatever you can to get there. But along those same lines, you have to be open, because like was shared earlier, you kind of never know where that's going to take you. And so I think it's important to be excited and find something about where you are that you can get excited about. Because look, not every day is exciting for all of us. There are certain things we all do that we might not like doing. But if you can find that piece that keeps you going and that really drives you, that's going to sustain you in any organization. Because if somebody can look at you and say, I know they don't like what they're doing right now, but I know they've got drive and ambition and they're smart, we're going to invest anything we can in this person to keep them, because they're here for the long haul.
Chip.
Yeah, I think, kind of dovetailing with that, I'd say there's three main qualities that can really help. And the hard thing is that, usually a person has one of them, and it's that strange Venn diagram of the mix. The first is being curious, genuinely curious and learning a lot of things. Whenever people ask me what I wanted to be when I grow up, if they still ask me now, I don't know, and I'm really glad that I don't, because I'm pretty convinced I haven't heard of what I'd really want to do yet. And I think being just, you can be passionate about things, but also be curious to learn more. And another is learn to pitch yourself well. If you have a lot of experiences, you're going to be applying for a job that's not a perfect fit for you, but maybe you did something that would knock it out of the park in that capacity. Learn to show that interviewer what you can offer them in that particular capacity. So be broad, but be able to zoom in and say, this specific instance can help you succeed. And then the third is being bold. And a lot of times maybe you're really curious, but you're hesitant because you don't know a lot, or maybe you can pitch yourself really well, but you're afraid, you overthink it, and you don't take that bold step to tell someone, I'm really interested in that. And I think that if you can manage those three things in the context of a long-term perspective, I remember when I came out of undergrad, I wanted to land like my dream job at 22. And that didn't happen, so I just left the country. I've learned that like basically your 20s are your time to like figure out a lot of stuff and build a cool background, and that's what you like leverage for the rest of your career. You probably don't want to be stuck in one job for the next 8 years when you graduate. You want to bounce around a little bit, build a cool background. They say this person's effective everywhere they go, but they've done many different things. We want to capture that and drive it forward.
Jen?
Yeah, it's all about creating transferable skills, and like people were saying before, when you go into a job, you're, like I think Shana said, you're not going to like every aspect of it, but the people who get noticed and the people who get pushed forward by interested managers are the people who hustle and who don't think any job is below them. I know every intern, every brand new entry-level person wants to do the really exciting stuff, but if we need envelope stuffed, we're going to do it with a smile on our face, and we're all going to pitch in. And the attitude that you approach your entry-level, sometimes very boring jobs with, it's very important to just work as hard as you can. And you're going to learn a lot of different skills in various different functions in that way, but and you might not find your passion immediately. It's good to explore, this is what I liked about this job, this is what I didn't, and move forward while always hustling at what you're doing, so I think that's a useful tip.
I think with any position and any anything that you're considering, the first thing that I would tell you is give yourself the opportunity for it. And that comes from the sense of having those conversations with networking with the alums, with NYU, with a job or position that you had. I actually had the position of working as a program assistant for the University of Georgia's internship program here in DC as well. And the thing that I see with the students that I worked with there is that many of them use those opportunities, and they had those discussions that are so vital in terms of saying, all right, what can I do next? Or what more can I do? Because what employers want is folks who are looking to do more, as well as maybe looking at what's next too. I actually had the opportunity to go to the LinkedIn Talent Connect conference, which is this recruiting thing that they did out in San Francisco last week. And one of the things that I really took away from that was just having that conversation of, you know what, I might not be here for the long haul, and I know that's kind of contrary to some mentalities that happen, but a lot of employers now are more willing to have those conversations up front in terms of what you want to do next. And a lot of times you can couch it in terms of what you want to do next within the organization and what opportunities are available for you in the organization. And sometimes there are employers who are very willing to look at it in terms of what are you going to do next, go and do something else, and then come back to the organization with more skills and more experience than you had previously. So the thing that I would really push, and one of the things that I say many times to folks is that if you don't ask or if you don't apply, the answer is always no. So give yourself that opportunity. Ask, apply for the internship, apply for the job, apply for the scholarship, whatever you might be doing. Those are very important things to remember. Giving yourself that opportunity is one of the things that is the biggest that you can do. And if there's one takeaway for me, I would say run with that. Apply, ask questions, give yourselves the opportunity.
So, I deal with employers about 50% of my life, which is great. I have some wonderful friends in that space. And they always tell me they speak at events, sometimes much larger than this, where there's hundreds of students, and they often say, here's my email address. If you have questions, follow up. And that the average time that a student follows up is like 1 in 100. That people just don't think that they should do that, because I think to these comments, like, you don't take the opportunity. So obviously everybody here is going to follow up. for now and evermore. But how can students or job seekers, who may be people that are out there in the market, distinguish themselves? Are there a couple of key skills, besides being curious, which Chip mentioned, and passion, but are there a couple of key skills, or are there some other ways that a student or a job seeker would stand out and you would notice it? I see you want to jump in. Please.
Yeah, I think it's, we were talking a little bit in the room before here in the green room, that students these days and job seekers tend to take longer to, kids seem to grow up slower than they did before. You want to go through school, you want to do the fun stuff. Not a lot of people want to get their hands dirty and learn math and learn econometrics and do those things and learn analytics. But you're growing up at a time that's perfect for you to become experts in that, because people that are just 20 years older than you didn't have the technology in college to learn those tools. And if you can come in with the ability to do graphic design, to do like econometric analysis, stuff that you could literally learn in like less than a 1 semester course, you're going to be marketable and get your job and your foot in the door, because people don't have, and it's hard because like it's scary. Econometrics sounds scary, and like math and the hard skills, but I found that that's what really distinguishes people that we hire. We hire 100 people a year, and those are consistent skills that if people can offer that, we want to see what they can do, and it only takes you a semester to learn it.
If I could jump
Jen,
in too.
please.
In terms of things that stand out about candidates applying for jobs, one, you have to research before you come to an interview. It's so strange to me that a simple Google search would have yielded all of this information, and the candidate coming in for an interview has no idea about recent events. And just, it sounds like they're just unprepared. Also, I don't know, this might be a little too old school, but I really appreciate a nice thank you email or a thank you note afterwards. I think that goes very far. Another thing is on your resumes, put all the internships, put all the great experiences, but if you're coming out of college and you don't have a whole lot of internships and a whole lot of experience, don't underestimate the importance of putting down the waitressing job you had last summer or the construction job you worked, because that shows you are willing to work hard, and that comes across very strongly for right out of undergrad applicants.
Who else would like to?
Can I jump
Please,
in?
of course.
One of the key pieces here that I tend to see missing a lot is some of the softer skills. So I think obviously the technical side of what you can do in your skill sets and your background and your training is critical, no doubt about that. But there is a very important side to the soft skills. And so what I mean by that, and I think talking about kind of what Jen was talking to as well, is when you apply for a job, there's sort of a professionalism that goes along with that. It's not as simple as just putting in your resume and making sure your resume looks good. Now that's critically important, and it has to be perfect. No spelling errors, all those kinds of things. But beyond that, it's really important that as you're networking and as you're meeting people, that you're taking that time to follow up with them, to send that thank you note, to show that you really care to be there. And I'll give you an example. So I mentioned that I went to NYU for grad school and GW for undergrad, and so I sit on 2 different alumni groups with both schools. And what that allows me to do is to have students reach out to me anytime they want to talk about their careers, if they want to apply to Deloitte or to the prior company where I was working, which was a very small entrepreneurial law firm. So 2 very different experiences. So I speak with students, I'm going to say on a daily basis. And more often than not, somebody reaches out and says, hey, I know you don't know me, I'd like to speak with you. And I'm always happy to do that because, again, we've been saying networking is really what gets you in the door, and that's how I got in the door, so I'm always willing to sort of pay it forward. But what will happen is people will call me, not have done their research, not have sent me a resume that's up to date, not have any questions for me, and I'm not here to interview you. I'm here because you asked me to take some time out of my very busy day and talk to you. So I expect somebody to come forward with that kind of information right off the bat, to sort of take the bull by the horns, drive the conversation, tell me what you want to talk about, what questions do you have, and then afterwards, send me a follow-up thank you note. Let me know that you appreciated the time that I took to spend with you, because like I said, this is time out of my day too, and when people reach out, I am always willing to pass a resume along, every single time. But if you don't sort of follow those very common courtesies, my gut is that I don't really want to represent this person because they're not going to fit into any organization, especially where I work. So I think those soft skills are very important. Don't underestimate those things because they will take you a really, really long way along with those technical skills as well.
Somebody else want to add? Sarah,
Taking that further, I completely agree. So, so much of what I do is based on managing relationships, how you interact with someone. When we get resumes, I can look down the line, X, Y, Z, yes, masters or, internships. They're very similar. You have to find that one, that one thing that makes you stand out. And that doesn't have to be proficiency in a technical kind of thing. It can be, I studied here, or I studied abroad, or I know another language. That's huge. But going off of emailing someone and saying, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee, and talk to you about what the World Wildlife Fund does. It really goes a long way, and it's not solely based on that one sheet of paper, that one resume. And then just one more thing to add, going off of, I think you were saying, do your homework. If you're applying at a place like the WWF and they have events or membership lists, or go to those events and have a drink with the people that work there, or incorporate that social aspect in, where you're connecting with someone on a much more relaxed get to know you level versus a formal interview.
I guess
Please,
the only
Kristen.
last thing I would add, something that worked for me, and that's how I got my first 2 jobs. I got the third one only the traditional way, was to already taking the research to the extent at the time of application that I would research who would be probably the hiring manager, even if it's not indicated. And once I started doing that, it was amazing, the responses I would get and the rate I would get interviews. So that was it's a small trick of the trade, but it really worked. And that's how I got my first 2 jobs.
I'm going to switch questions now. I'm going to start with Carrie, because he mentioned LinkedIn, Talent Connect. So I have a question about social, but it's 2 definitions of social, and sort of everybody's touching on it. So one is LinkedIn and tools like that as a force. So social media, Twitter and other LinkedIn as platforms, and connectivity. And by the way, this is a very complicated question, at least in my mind, is that there's, I think, a misnomer that, places like, Deloitte and very well-known organizations are all over social media in their recruiting strategy, but foundations and the government are not. So I'd like you to talk about that.
Okay.
And the other is the social aspect. Washington, D.C. has more happy hours than I've ever seen in my life, and I live in New York. And it seems that people really seem to do a lot of business and network in that. So I'm going to throw that for you to start, and I have a feeling everybody else is going to want to pipe
All
in.
right.
But you'll be next.
I'll take a small bite off of it so I don't get more than I can chew on that. There's a lot to that. And the LinkedIn and what you say on LinkedIn and what you say in your resume. And I'll go back to something that Chip mentioned in terms of skills and making sure that you have the analysis and all of this. Our world is run by data, okay? And without emphasizing too much the point of go and get a degree in econometrics or statistics or whatever. You can get those courses without having to have a degree or be an expert in that, okay? Because what happens is what you put on LinkedIn and what you put in your resume, they get picked up in algorithms, and they get sent out to say, hey, check this out, you might be interested in this. I had a conversation, and they actually had a consultant to what they called rock my profile. Mine is not great right now based on my conversation with that consultant. But the thing that she talked about was just the words that you use to describe what you want to get across to potential applicants as a recruiter. There were 3,600 recruiters who were at this conference talking about how to use LinkedIn to find talent and to focus on talent acquisition. 3,600. And that's something that's big, and they had, how to go and do a Boolean search and be a search ninja or something like that. So in terms of that particular piece of it, don't let it be, I would say don't let it be overwhelming, but make sure that it is well crafted, what's on LinkedIn, what's in your resume, and don't just have one resume, okay? Each of the folks here who will review resumes will tell you different things in terms of what they look for a particular position where they're going. For the federal government, having the words that are in the position, and this is where that research comes in. Having the words, and it doesn't have to be verbatim, because what that does is you actually get it in front of a human being, and the human being goes, see you later. Find a way to craft what you're saying so that it matches without being a mirror of what you're looking at. Because what happens is when you're looking at that data and you're looking at the social media and you have recruiters at Deloitte or elsewhere who are looking to recruit, and Peace Corps actually has a LinkedIn recruitment seat and has several now for potential volunteers. What we look for is folks who match what we're interested in and what we want our employees to do and to be. If you have that interest in working for WWF or Cato, there's a possibility they might not even use LinkedIn, but there's a possibility that they will. So use those tools that you have, because it is a tool. It's very much a tool in terms of making people aware of your talents and what you have available. And then in terms of DC and happy hours, I'll actually argue with you that New York has a few more happy hours, and that's having lived in New York relatively recently. But what I will say is that the ones in DC are much more focused in terms of the networking piece, and I'll actually pull back on that because I've only been in DC this time around for about 7 months, so I haven't got as much into that.
So you have more happy hours to go. But
I do indeed.
But Rajani, can you comment on that? But before that, I just want to say the conference I was at last week, I learned just about data that 5 years ago, it took many days to process a terabyte or several terabytes of data. Now it can be done in 12 minutes. Yeah. 12 minutes. And that's why, organizations are using these algorithms to really identify talent, and those keywords and those analytics, they show up. So,
the only thing I would add is be careful what you project. We live in an age of social media. A lot of the conversation is driven by Twitter and Facebook. So, I often find myself wondering, what is the presidential screening going to look like in the near future, just by virtue of the things that you can find out about a person's past easily, depending upon how quickly they glommed onto the social media wave. And so, that said, I think employers, your Facebook page is fair game. Your Twitter page is fair game in terms of potential employers looking at them and trying to deduce what kind of individual you are. So just make sure that if you have a Twitter page, if you have a professional one, have that, and a personal one. If you wouldn't necessarily want certain views or you're concerned about personal beliefs that may throw off a potential employer, be intentional about ensuring that your two accounts are very different from one another, that they can't be linked. That said, I think you can perfectly blend your personal and your professional worlds together, and ideally that's what you can do, and you'll still be an attractive candidate, because we're looking for diversity in perspectives, diversity in background, diversity in lived experience, and all of that. We know we're complex human beings, and our thoughts and beliefs should reflect that. But that said, just be really intentional about what you project out there. The photos that you never know, there's no such thing as delete or erase online. I think anything can be called back up, and clearly data mining is such a huge profitable venture that just know that whatever you put out there can resurface, and can resurface at the most inconvenient times.
I would add just quickly on that is that just changing your privacy settings so people can't see your page or just your friends can, that's not enough cover. I actually met a recruiter who said that they would search for a mutual, like a friend of that person, to get in and check out the profiles of people. So don't just hide behind that. But it doesn't. The other point that I would say is get your stuff out there. If someone applies and they have an obscure blog that 3 people have read, I might be one of those 3 people, and it'll be like insightful critiques of something, and that could land you a position. So I'd say that. And then the final is like networking. I think if I asked the definition, like what is networking, I think we'd have 2 groups. We'd have like one group that says, I don't know how to define it, and the other would have like every single person would have a different definition. And networking, in my eyes, is not going to a happy hour or reception and passing out business cards. I've seen it happen. Like I'm talking to friends who are also hiring managers, and someone comes up and says, "Hi, it's nice to meet you. Here's my card," and they split. And like I've seen like managers tear those up and throw them away because it's like insulting.
Right.
Networking is about strategic friendships and relationships, and you can be friends with people who are 50 years old, and just developing an interesting conversation over a beer. That's what networking is. And by the end, you shouldn't be giving your card only. Get theirs so that you can follow up. I have a stack of cards of people that like have given me their cards before, and I have a stack of people that I have taken theirs and written to them. So I'd say networking is basically about becoming friends with people who are very different than you, but that you want to learn from.
I want to switch and do a bit of, I'll call it the lightning round because I don't know, I just, very quick, pithy answers. What is the biggest, I'll use the term no-no or faux pas that you've ever seen a candidate do or that candidates do consistently? And I know, Jen, you mentioned about not doing research, but let me start with you. Do you have something to add on to that? And I want to go really quickly because I want to have one more final quick question, and then I want the folks in the audience to be able to speak to you.
Sure. That I think was the biggest one. A major event had happened, and we mentioned it in the interview, and this person had no idea. Just a Google search would have found it. So it was odd to me. It just gave us a sense of, you don't want to be here. Why are you wasting our time? So I think that was the biggest no-no.
So not doing research.
Yeah.
Chip?
That's a huge one for us. I think just not knowing the organization. I think that's huge. And then don't be a jerk. It sounds easy, but don't be a jerk on your social media feed. Don't be a jerk in person. Learn those soft skills that Shana was mentioning, because those are so important. So not having soft skills throws out a candidate's wonderful analytics and their great resume.
Okay. Sarah?
I think being nice and courteous goes so far. So occasionally we'll get an email that's like, "Hey, here's my resume. I want this job, thanks." And we're like, okay, well, that's great, but just doing it with some tact and some courtesy, yeah.
Okay. Rajani?
I would say meaningfully engage. I think, to grossly paraphrase Maya Angelou, people will remember not necessarily what you said, but how you made them feel. And so I think that very much goes to the point that be sincere, don't come off as a jerk, but also be passionate, because ultimately what organizations are looking for are passionate people who are willing to stick around, contribute, but then also learn from them. So,
Krista?
At the application stage, I would say unproofed cover letters or resumes that haven't been polished. And then during the interview, avoiding eye contact. That's a big no-no. Goes to the soft skill, I would think.
So you have 10 seconds to make a first impression. So that handshake, that introduction of your name, that is how people are going to judge you. After that, whatever you say, it's going to probably weigh based on those first 10 seconds. So make those first 10 seconds very, very strong.
And every one of the things that I had as we're going down the line have been slowly ticked off in terms of what I was thinking about and what I was going with. But I think in all of this too, be genuine in what you're doing and what you're saying. I know that sounds very like touchy-feely and huggy, but the thing is that can come across. If you're just there to hand out a business card, somebody will notice that, and it's something that is very, very clear. If you have genuine interest, go after that and do that, and people will notice that, and it will really come through in what you're doing and what you want to do.
And I think, because all of you kind of touched on this, and you also said it about the business card, which is, don't think because you're either a student or a job changer that you might not have something to offer the person you're networking with, and this paying it forward is just so incredibly important, and figuring out if there's something in common or something you could add and contribute, and it could even be nothing job related. But something to make this human connection, which I think is very often forgotten. So I think that's important. Last question before I open it up to all of you, another quick round, is, we're going to wrap this up. What quick but important piece of advice have we not touched on that you want to make sure that the students who are streaming this and the students in the audience get before we leave? And I'll start with you, sir.
The one that I've always tried to keep in mind comes from one of my mentors when I was getting my undergraduate degree, and it's all about the relationships. And it's kind of been said, but it's a very simple phrase, and it's very, very important. It is all about the relationships and making sure that you connect with those and have that genuine connection and genuine purpose in terms of what you want to do.
Great. Shana?
Okay, I think Chip said this earlier, but being able to sort of pitch yourself, know what you're going to say to somebody when they ask who you are, what you do, what you studied, be ready to just blurt it out. Again, you've got 10 seconds, so take advantage of that time when you've got a very short amount of time with somebody.
For me, I guess my field is pretty broad, so I would say the importance of just reading 1 or 2 articles a day in your field or the field you're trying to break into. Interviews are not as structured these days. You have conversation meanders, and you could look like a really shining piece if you can connect to a random question that just comes up through a conversation during interviews. So you never know when. Just generally being well aware and abreast of developments in your field could become useful during a 15-minute interview.
Please.
I would say get uncomfortable. This is the time to really get out of your comfort zone. I think that's another big issue that, at least in the US, we tend to be very siloed in our thinking and also in our work. You'll find that out. But getting uncomfortable, not being afraid to go to a reception or a networking event that may be completely outside of the sphere of your current interest. You'll never know what might spike your passion or your interest and may set you on a completely different course. And really, it won't be different because everything is interconnected in some way, but now's the time. Do it.
Please.
So I have 2 quick ones. The first one is go abroad and travel. You will learn so much about yourself and so much about what you want to do, and that comes across when you're interviewing and trying to figure out where you want to be in 10 years. The other thing is remember that there's a big difference between HR and the team that you're going to be working on. So find out what you want to do. If you want to work on the media and external affairs team, learn their names, learn what they do, send them your resume so they're looking for it, and then do what you do, the step-by-step stuff that you need to do with HR.
I guess I'd phrase it as being humbly ambitious. And I think those are 2 things that we commonly just say, oh yeah, of course I'm already those things. But humble includes like respecting the other person on the side of the other emailer that you're like writing a letter to, or the interviewer, and like saying things that they're going to get interested in, and being like attuned to like what they're responding positively to. And if you think one of your stories from your resume is not that important, but they seem to really keep coming back to it, give them what they want. And like, don't force them. Sometimes we get emails that just say like, you don't know what you're missing out by not accepting me. I'm this, and it's like you applied for an internship. So like, you're not applying to be the CEO. Like, get right with that. You have a whole career ahead of you. Like, just realize where you are and be humble about it, but then be ambitious. And the quality that really makes people stand apart is, my roommate was just talking to me yesterday about this, and he said, I keep getting these job offers, and it's for technologies that I don't know, but they keep calling me because like I'm anxious to learn them, and I'm driven, and I want to keep progressing in my career and not plateau. And that like character trait, if you're able to foster that, it's going to naturally come out in your conversation. So don't be so focused on I got to get all these things right. You have to do that. But then like get to the point where you can relax and become a person again and pitch all of those things.
Jen,
Two
please.
things. Be a person you would want to work with and for. That's very helpful, I think. And then two, once you get the job, start anticipating your boss's needs as best as you can without, of course, overstepping. If you see something on the schedule for next week and it looks like a meeting needs more preparation, or you want to look up meeting notes from the last meeting, do it. I mean, anticipating what the office needs, anticipating what your team needs, anticipating what your boss needs is, I think, very, very useful and very appreciated.
Right, and being the go-to and being able to project that even in the interviewing process, that you've anticipated some of the things that are going on. So, what questions do we have from all of you? Hi, please.
I think we'll wait for the mic.
Oh,
in
wait,
case
yeah, they're going to bring you a
recording.
mic. It's very official.
My question is, when we talk about the 10-second pitch, what are things that you're looking for to learn about that person? So if I'm preparing my 10-second pitch, what are things that I should be saying?
Yeah, so what's your name? Clearly, so people can say it. I'm not asking right now, but people want to know what is your name, and you want to say it clearly so that they can remember it. What do you do, or what do you study? What are you passionate about, and why are you here to speak with me?
Also, firm handshake. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
No, please.
The limp handshake is just awful. Just fix it now. Everyone
not
work
like
on
this.
it.
Right.
Yeah, well, I'm
Yeah,
not going
not
to
like
kiss your hand. Shake my hand. Yeah, sorry.
slimy or
There's
any of that.
a quick tip on the handshaking is like if you're at a reception, you're probably drinking something, and as right-handed people, we generally hold something, and if it has condensation on it, you're holding a cold drink, like you shake someone's hand and it's very cold. So at receptions, I always hold my drinks in the left hand.
Yep.
And then I put my hand in my pocket to make sure it's warm. Like not grossly warm, but like,
Or drink red wine. So, which was, by the way, a feature story about the power women on television. Did you all see that? The power women on television, like the Good Wives scandal, everybody's drinking red wine. So for the women in the audience, maybe the guys, red wine is clearly the power drink of Washington. Thank you. Another question? Please, wait for the mic, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the panel. I think I'm slightly more advanced in my career than most of the people in here, so I apologize if you're not interested. But what do you do if your agency, and in fact your department, has been involved in a major public scandal? How do you address it? I can see it as being either tragic or an opportunity. I'd like to know how to make sure it's the second, not the first.
Wow.
So I can speak to this because we handle crisis communications very regularly. And obviously, the best handled situations are never heard of. But I think it's having a plan in place. So, I mean, it's going to depend if this was unexpected or not. But really collaborating together as a team. Unexpected?
I'm talking about if you decide that you don't want to stay where you are and you
Ah,
want to
okay.
transition someplace else, how do you handle it as a job applicant?
Maybe I'll let someone else answer this question.
I think my question would be, were you involved in it? Because if you were not involved in it, whether there's a connection to that agency.
Not in the slightest, and I checked, I Google completely clean.
then
Yeah, don't
that's
worry
something
about
that I feel like if you're having that conversation with someone and you're able to talk about it and that comes up, I think just be forward with it and say, I didn't have an involvement with this. And I wouldn't fret about it that much, because you're looking, really what you're looking at here is the individual versus the organization. And we all understand that as an employee, sometimes you get a job that you get because you need to have a job. And that's something, and I don't, don't fully quote me on this, but it's one of those things that, be able to project that about yourself and project that your interest is in the organization that you're applying to, that you are passionate about what you're interested in.
I know Krista wanted to.
I would echo essentially the same sentiment. Don't feel that you're personally liable, and unless they bring it up in the interview, perhaps don't even mention it. You could just keep it very simple. You're looking for new opportunities. You can mention your organization is going through a transition. These are all very soft code words.
Right.
That's something.
Nobody's going to not know.
I would say
I was
that,
guessing. I was just guessing that.
don't
But I-
ignore the gorilla in the room,
Yeah.
right? If you come from someplace, we regularly get applicants and they've worked at organizations that maybe are not closely aligned or even opposed to what our organization does. And if someone doesn't mention that, that application quickly goes in the bin because we have no clue. But if someone brings it up, if you bring it up and you say, yeah, this is a big thing that's happening, you can make light of it, but then you talk about why that may have been an impetus for you to move on. Again, you're not tainted as much by your bad experience. Or an internship. Maybe, you really want to end up in some Democrat's office on the Hill, but everyone in your hometown's a Republican, and you wanted to get political experience, and you're able to say that and say, I learned these transferable skills, but the reason I'm really interested in working for you and not here is this. And it gives you an opportunity out of, lemon out of lemonade. Or lemonade.
Yeah, I think that's, not ignoring it is, I think, really important. I think that's really, and distancing yourself. If you think about the 2007, 2008 collapse on Wall Street and the folks that worked for Lehman Brothers, for example, and a few of those other firms, a lot of those people had to go on the job market. And, if the ones that really said, listen, I was dealing with this, and this, I had no idea this was going on, it wasn't part of the work I did, and in fact, that's why I want to go with a really good firm that has a different kind of vision and moral fiber, and et cetera. I think you can spin it in the right way. Not that you want to sound rehearsed, but I think you should anticipate it, and how would I bring it up in a good way at the right opportunity.
And I think this is when the personal connection really becomes a huge factor. You want someone who can vouch for you, essentially. So if you're really invested in going to, or you've identified the firm or the organization that you want to go to next, either see if you can make a personal connection with someone there that you're able to really reveal yourself. And therefore, you don't have to solely depend on that point where you're probably in the interview room and you have to have a nice packaged response to perhaps the question that is asked. So I think that's when you really want to reach out to someone who's there, form a relationship, cultivate it, and then really be able to show them who you are so that they can say, oh, she's completely removed from that organization. She had nothing to do. And I think more importantly, she's going to be a perfect fit for us.
So I thought we'd take more questions, but I look and see that we've gone over. So what we're going to do is, in a moment, there's a reception right outside, and we're going to join there, and some of our panels will be able to stay, and you can actually, it's a small group, they won't be streamed, and you can ask some of your questions individually. But before we do that, can you please join me in thanking this fabulous panel? I know I learned a whole lot. So the reception begins. So please join us outside. Thank you.